So now we move on, ladies and gentlemen, and we return to the serious business. Now look, I just about guarantee that there is nobody in this room with as much money at their disposal, not even the Guptas, as our next speaker. The problem is, the money is not his own. The money's actually yours, or at least in many ways. But how Elias Masilela chooses to spend it is the crucial question. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Executive Officer of the Public Investment Corporation, who hopefully will tell us where he's putting his money next, and then we'll get there first.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Good evening. After this panel, suddenly this is the most difficult slot for the day. What makes it even more difficult is that I could be the only public servant in the House. And that means I cannot talk about my principles. When I was thinking about tonight, I asked myself a number of questions. What is it that you don't know about the PIC? I looked at the program, and I found that there were 3 keynote speakers before me. Raced in my mind to establish what a keynote address actually is, I concluded that it's actually inappropriate to consider this as a keynote address. What I have decided to do is to classify it as a pleading. For those of us who deal with lawyers, they'll understand what it means. I will come from an angle which questions whether today or the next day or two should be a celebration or a new challenge. And in thinking about the environment in which we're working, I would like to think that we are dealing with a new challenge. Despite that, I am very pleased to be standing in front of you today and being part of this magnificent celebration. 45 years is not an easy feat, particularly in the sector in which we operate. It is made even more difficult by the fact that it is not the 45 years that matter. It's what we do with the experience of those 45 years. And that is why the challenge is more important than the celebration. However, I don't want to be nasty to my hosts. I'm going to allow them to celebrate. But I will plead that we celebrate within context. Some of you may be asking yourself, what is this context? The truth is that despite the fact that we're in one country, we will have different contexts. And what I will try and share with you today is what we see as a context from a PIC point of view. When I walked in earlier on this morning, I found the last panel before lunch discussing REITs. I was very attracted to the subject. But what it told me was that there's a lot of thinking that we still need to do. What I am going to do in my intervention is not try and deal with the sexy issues that the panel was dealing with. I'm going to try and deal with the less exciting things that you hardly worry about as people in this room. And that is residential housing, particularly affordable housing for the middle income to the low income earners in South Africa. I choose this route because for us, as the PIC, it's an imperative. It is key for sustainability. It is key for preserving the little social stability that we have in the country. It is an important national priority. It actually defines our mandate as the PIC. As I was driving up here, I get an SMS from Lisiba, an SMS that says, "Elias, I'm feeling lonely." And I respond back and I say, "Why?" He says, "It seems like I'm the only one who's thinking about social considerations in this room." And if that is true, then I think we have a bigger debate to engage. Why he had to send me that SMS is because of one of his terms of employment. I will read it to you so that as you engage with him going forward, you understand what drives him, what binds him, what will restrict him with respect to the things that you ask him to do. He's got about 9 of them, and one of them reads as follows: to contribute to the National Development Plan and to contribute to the quality of life through investing in previously underdeveloped markets. Now, this is the kind of responsibility that we have as the PIC over and above beating benchmarks. Estienne, it's not an observation against REITs. It's an observation that tries to augment what REITs wants to do. We would like to see housing not only as an intervention to develop infrastructure, because it is the bedrock of any society. It is a human right of every member of society. It is a fundamental contribution to the accumulation of economic capital in a country. And with these characteristics, we would like to see REITs existing simultaneously or side by side to achieve what is being proposed here. It is even more important to the PIC because it is the key part of the third pillar of our developmental investment strategy, a very important piece. What does the developmental investment strategy say? It says we cannot invest in isolation of the social imbalances that we see in the economy. We cannot invest with the aim of maximizing returns and forgetting the poverty that is around us. We cannot be driven by short-term returns, but we need to think about the long term. Why we have Marikanas today is because of the short-termism in which we've been running our businesses all along. Why did we have Arab Spring breakout? It's for exactly the same reasons. Now, the statistics that were given to us earlier on are merely indicators of potential social instability going forward. And if you invest ignoring those potentials, the good returns that you are enjoying today are not sustainable. When we think about investing in the PIC, we are thinking about investing not for this lifetime, but for future generations. And that means we are forced to take a long-term view. People may be asking, what is this developmental investment strategy? This is a strategy that is responding to the socio-economic imbalances that have been observed in the economy. And these are low economic growth, high levels of unemployment, poor competitiveness of the economy both within and without the borders of South Africa, waning exports. The list is long. And we are saying, how can we invest to reverse these observations? The developmental investment strategy has a four-pillar approach. The first pillar is a pillar that emphasizes the investing in economic infrastructure, in roads, telecommunications, power lines, in harbors, all those investments that are going to enhance the productivity of the economy. The second pillar is the social infrastructure pillar, which is a pillar that responds to the low productivity that has been observed on labor in South Africa. That people are concerned that organized labor is asking for unsustainable wage rate increases is not the source of the problem. The source of the problem is that these demands are not matched with commensurate productivity from labor units. Therefore, our view is to intervene in the economy to help improve the productivity of labor. That is investing in things such as schools, health, affordable housing in the right places, not investing in reserves, bringing people closer to their workplaces in order to reduce what we call administered prices. The third pillar has to do with greening the economy. When we think of greening the economy, you are not talking about hugging trees. It's much deeper than that. It's about investing not only for this lifetime, but for future lifetimes, so that generations that come after us inherit a valuable economy. So every entity that we deal with, every investee company we put money in, needs to account from a sustainability point of view and the extent to which they contribute to the economy for future generations. The third pillar looks at the development and support of the SMME industry. This is a direct response to unemployment in the economy. If we believe all the studies that have been put out by the DTI and academic institutions, both in South Africa and elsewhere, we will believe that if we put money in the SMME space, it will generate more jobs than we do in the other parts of the economy. Having said that, I would like us to think about what the statistics says about the supply-demand balance in the economy with respect to housing. I would like to quote a statistic from the census, latest census survey, which identifies that there are 14.5 million households in South Africa. Out of those, only 13.6 have access to what they call informal dwellings. Thinking about it in proportionate terms, it is not scary. But if you think about it in absolute terms, it is a real concern. This translates to 1.7 million units of houses. If these houses are not permanent and are not necessarily desirable to the people who use them, that is the basic number of houses that we have to generate for the economy. At the same time, we observe that house prices continue to tick up, which means accessibility or affordability for people in the middle to low end of our income echelons will struggle to access housing going forward. The latest number shows that in 2012, the price index of medium-sized houses rose by 9.53%. And that is 3.57% in real terms. I don't want to bore you with other statistics about what the absolute prices or cost of houses are in the different levels of the structures. Safe to say that access and meeting that gap is increasingly becoming elusive. Whilst I may have quoted the statistics, I may have sounded very comfortable with the statistics. The truth is that I'm actually timid. I'm timid because the average South African worker does not follow the numbers that I'm talking about, is not moved by the numbers that I'm talking about, but is moved by the number of units that are actually delivered. And as the PIC, we do worry about what the average South African worker thinks, because it is their money that we manage. However, sitting in Pretoria, we are unlikely to deal with these supply and demand imbalances. We are unlikely to deal with the expectation gap that exists in this sector of our economy. The people who can are the people in this room. How you do it is entirely up to you. When you do it properly, we will be your cheerleaders. The reverse will result in us being your harshest critics. Therefore, thinking about this industry going forward, we need to think about it not only from the short term, but also from the long term. This is because when we think about it, we need to think about it in a multi-generational fashion. In this juncture of the economy, when you talk about anything that we do, we cannot ignore the lessons that we get from the National Development Plan. It has been mentioned once or twice before, but I thought I needed to give you a slightly different perspective of the National Development Plan. It is not a government plan. It is not a plan for the Planning Commission. It is not a plan for any political party. It is our plan. It is your plan. What the plan does is it calls every South African to action. It forces a change in thinking, which is going to bring about a structural change in the way in which the economy is run. It ensures that each and every one of us takes responsibility of bringing about those changes. The worrying part of the earlier discussion was that it tended to look at government as to what it will do in order to deliver against the plan. We can no longer wait for government. We need to be the leaders. We need to lead. We need to make our decisions have an impact on growth, and not only growth, but inclusive growth. We need to make sure that we contribute towards the delivery of a decent standard of living to South Africans. There is no better industry than this industry to achieve that objective. One of the key objectives that are identified in the National Development Plan is sound human settlement. And the biggest player in that objective is this room. You cannot wait for government. As the PIC, we did not want to wait for a directive from government in order to do the right thing. Long before the unveiling of the National Development Plan, 2 years ago, we made a conscious decision as the PIC to extend our investment outlook from a 3-year outlook to a 10-year outlook, an outlook that is reviewed on an annual basis to be extended to be in line with the assets that we manage. The average life of the assets that we manage is anything between 30 to 50 years, depending on how you define a lifetime. And that, to us, is a signal to our partners in saying we can no longer engage with partners that are short-term in the way in which they engage with the economy. In the same thinking, we developed a strategy which was approved by our board 2 years ago, dealing with all sectors of the economy. But thinking about this particular sector or industry in the economy, we have 2 key targets which are defined by an underlying objective of being a player in integrating the economy, making sure that we achieve a level of equalization between the rural and the urban economy. And the objectives are to facilitate the biggest empowered property services provider amongst the top 3 in the country in the next 10 years. 2, to facilitate the biggest empowered investor and construction company to be amongst the top 3 in the country. What that means is that at the heart of what we're trying to build is an industry that is fully, deeply, and honestly empowered. Not entities that go into empowerment to be disempowered. We have seen this playing itself over and over again. We are saying it has to come to an end. When we talk of empowerment, it has to be honest. I am not going to tell you how to do it, but I will, as originally said, I will plead with you to find the right routes and the right interventions to empower the industry in a sustainable fashion. So when we think about this part of the economy, it is not just about a race to the production of a certain number of units of houses, but it's about integrating the industry into the rest of the economy. As I've already declared, the PIC on its own cannot do it. The government on its own cannot do it. The GPF on its own cannot do it. It has to be a partnership. And this partnership is spelled out in the National Development Plan as a social compact. Not a document, but something that sits in our hearts. A conscience that says, what is it that I can do for the country to change the way in which it functions? You may be saying, How do we do it? I will help you. In helping you, I will leave you with 7 points to ponder. You may choose to define these 7 points as 7 years of drought or 7 years of a bumper harvest. I would like to think about these points as the latter. Firstly, we implore you individually as companies and employees of your entities to go and read the National Development Plan with the aim of identifying your role and niche for yourself and what you can do to contribute. Secondly, we plead with you to help us to deal with the issue of access and making sure that, on average, every South African has access to decent housing. Thirdly, help us to optimally match the currently high level of demand for housing in South Africa relative to the supply. 4, help us deal with the issue of affordability of housing. One observation that we've made is that all the units of houses that we have funded as the PIC could have been produced at a significantly lower price than what they've been produced at. A price or a number that has been bandied around is that they could have been produced at anything between 60% and 80% of the current unit price. And the question is, who is benefiting? We have an obligation to deliver on housing. Not only deliver on housing, but deliver on housing in an affordable and sustainable fashion. And the signal that we would like to leave today is we shall continue engaging with the industry, participating with the industry, and using you as partners to deliver the housing that we have to deliver. But if this works against the people who own the assets that we manage, we shall be forced to go it alone. Therefore, the intermediary risk that we're faced with will have to be cut out. 5, help us to develop financial institutions that target the right markets. When I'm talking about right markets, match the units to the right cost structure and to the right demander in the market. 6, invest in the right areas and provide the right quality. 7, please help us close the gap. No South African should be left out in the open. So we implore you to empower in a responsible and sustainable way, not only for the industry, but also for your business. Ladies and gentlemen, in celebrating, after having achieved these 7 objectives, there would be no better way of celebrating than that for South Africa, and all of us shall be proud to raise what we would have done over the past 45 years, such that observers outside of South Africa envy what we do. The next 5 years, which is not related to the 5 years that we're talking about, which is the 5 years that takes you to your half century, should be focused on these 7 steps. In that regard, I would like to conclude as the National Development Plan concludes. It is our future. Make it work for us. Thank you very much.
One question. Did you find that debate depressing? Not difficult.
I found it a bit depressing, but more importantly, I found it too depressed and too removed from the reality of South Africa. One of the worrying considerations that I picked up out of the discussion was that we were listening to people who did not want to be part of the solution, who expected somebody else to provide the solutions within which they can then benefit.
How much money have you got under? How much money do you control?
Personally,
No. You know, in the fund.
we manage an asset base of 1.3 trillion rands. We are proud to announce.
Yeah, go on.
We are
What, that you're giving me a loan?
Yeah. We are proud to announce that over the past year, we've increased assets under management by 19%.
Right. So 1.3 trillion. Hang on. What is, because I don't think any of us here can conceive what it must be like to open your bank statement and see 1.3 trillion at the bottom of it. So just tell us, what is the one biggest headache managing that sort of money?
Ironically, we don't have a headache managing that amount of money. The headache that we have is managing the expectations from South Africans, who seem to think that the PIC can invest the country out of trouble. We cannot. Any investment is a function of, any successful investment is a function of the state of the macroeconomy and the state of the policy and regulatory structure within which it operates.
So
That is
you
our
have
headache.
I know we need to finish. So if that is true, sir, you have a very strong vested interest in the good governance of the economic situation in this country. And if you see, for example, sub-Saharan African growth at 6% and South African growth at, say, 2.3% or 2.8%, that should give you cause for concern.
That too is not our major concern.
You can't have it both ways.
No, it's one way. It's not our concern.
But you just said the macroeconomic situation is your concern. And what I'm saying is, if central government is driving the economy over the cliff, is that your concern?
And I'm saying it's not our concern. It's not our concern because we are not only concerned about the performance of the South African economy, we are concerned about the performance of both the South African and the global economies. We now have a mandate to invest offshore.
Right.
And our thinking about investing offshore is investing offshore to grow markets for SA Inc. If we're able to grow markets for SA Inc., therefore, whether South Africa is growing at 3% or 2%, if Nigeria is growing at 6%, that is a benefit for SA Inc.
Just at what point does ex-South African or non-South African investments become more crucial to you than investments within the country on that basis?
Ask your question again.
If you have a mandate that you can now invest outside the borders, into the global economy, with the size and scale of your fund, at what point does non-South African investments become more important to you, i.e. the rest of the global economy versus what's happening within the borders economically?
It's a very difficult question to answer because you can interpret it in all sorts of ways. But if you start off from the premise that South Africa has always been an open economy, has been an economy that has relied on the growth of the rest of the world, in particular Europe and Asia. Investments in those parts of the world are very crucial to us, to making sure that the surplus production that we generate in South Africa has a market.
1.3 trillion. What was your return last year? What percentage? Roughly, give round figures.
13%?
I guess you're buying the drinks tonight? Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Executive.
Thank you very much.
Oh, hang on. Hang on. The box is out. I think it's empty. If we don't find out what's in that box before we've finished, take pictures, this might be good evidence. Right. I am obliged to tell you that the SAPOA AGM is being held in 5 minutes in the Eagle Room, and you're all most warmly and accordingly invited and should attend. Otherwise, this evening it is the cocktail party and the cocktail function, co-hosted with Liberty Properties, JHI Properties and Growth Point. The drinks might still be on our good friend from the PIC. And don't forget tomorrow, that 30,000 rand. 30,000. All right, time to go and have a drink. I'll see you tomorrow.